Thank you so much. We are so honored to be here today to celebrate Sumayya Vally and to celebrate the Dhaka Art Summit and to celebrate Asia Now. I really want to offer my profound congratulations to Alexandra and the team of Asia Now Paris, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. I think many of us in this room have been coming since its very first iteration, and it is extraordinary to see this fair and the force and power. I'm just thanking you and congratulating you on 10 years. And as we enter into this conversation, we recognize that Asia Now has not only been a platform for the presentation and dissemination and conversation around art from the Asia as we are redefining it all the time, but also for conversation and discourse and encounter, and as an opportunity for artists and thinkers and curators and collectors and thought leaders from really around the globe who are engaged in this campaign, if still a campaign, it is still a fight for the recognition of ideas, of artists, of activities that are happening in regions outside still some dominant ones. It's a fight for a reorientation, a new perspective. And we all get together here in Paris and share those different perspectives and different positions. We have an amazing panel today to discuss Sumayya Vally's work, an iteration of which we see in the courtyard that was activated today at noon. We know Sumayya is a magician because this work is dedicated to water and to rain and to the weather, and it brought the rains. So there you go. The force, the cosmic force that you are really had 6 dimensions of realization today, and we were all very much part of it. The title for today's work that is part of Asia Now is Water in One Hand and Fire in the Other. But as we know, it is a genealogical iteration of the much larger and durational work that was presented at the 6th edition of the Dhaka Art Summit in 2023 as a commission of the Samdani Art Foundation, for which we have Nadia, Samdani and her husband Rajiv to thank for their extraordinary and visionary support of artists and their commissions and their activities and activations in Bangladesh. The work was also activated this morning by 3 Sufi practitioners. And for that collaboration, we have Alexandra Baudelot to thank, the new director of the new Musée d'Art et de Culture Soufis, which is right outside Paris, which we want to hear more about presently. That work, this work, and the Dhaka Art Summit work was produced by curator Kelly Alliou, and we thank you for your, Kelly, sorry, right? Do I get that right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The only work produced, I've been working on those on Asia Now.
On the Asia Now. So we thank you for that, for the curatorial presentation of this iteration of this amazing work. I want to remind us of something that Sumayya said in an interview at the time that your Serpentine Pavilion opened. And I feel this quote, this statement really encapsulates the spirit of these 2 works, these 2 related works. You said, "My practice is centered around amplifying and collaborating with multiple and diverse voices from many different histories, with an interest in themes of identity, community, belonging, and gathering." So first, we really want to congratulate you, Sumayya, for both the Dhaka Art Summit presentation, which I think critics lauded as really one of the highlights of the 23 Dhaka Art Summit, and one of the great demonstrations of your practice and your vision and your approach to everything that you just mentioned of community, architecture, time, and performance. So I thought we could really start by just introducing ourselves, each of you introducing yourself, and then we will come back to Sumayya with an introduction. She needs no introduction, but why don't we begin with Nadia, with an overview of the Dhaka Art Summit, but just a bit of introduction on yourself first before we really delve into this work.
Great, thank you. I'm Nadia Samdani. I'm the co-founder of Samdani Art Foundation and Dhaka Art Summit. We started our foundation in 2011, and the first Dhaka Art Summit was in 2012. Last year, we completed our 6th edition. So Dhaka Art Summit is a biannual art festival. We do it in partnership with the government, and it's like a big art festival where we invite lots of curators from around the world. It's a research-based event, and there's, of course, artworks, performances, talks, a lot of workshops. It's an open event. It's a free event, open for all. We have no VIP hours, no tickets, no registration. So basically, it's like a big art festival where everybody is invited. It's also one of the highest visited art events in the world.
Extraordinary.
So in 9 days, last edition, in 9 days, we had almost 500,000 visitors.
Congratulations. Venice Art Biennial, by comparison, over 8 months, in its best attended iteration, also in 2019, had about 660,000. So that is totally extraordinary. Congratulations to you both for this transformational event, which really has exerted its gravitational force and intellectual force on all of us.
Thank you. The Dhaka Art Summit, and we also invite a lot of artists for every edition to do commissions for us, and it's research-based. We work with several curators, and like in 2023, we had many artists who have done incredible commissions, and one of our highlights was Sumayya Vally's work, where we had invited her with our curator, Diana Campbell, and who co-curated her project with Sean Anderson. They invited her to do this project. She came to Dhaka, researched, and in the background, you'll see some images what the result of this incredible project was. And what makes me very proud now is all throughout, history, or in the last, forever, we've seen that projects that were commissioned or work created in the West have always traveled to us in South Asia.
Yeah.
But now we are seeing projects that were commissioned by us or created in parts like South Asia, in Bangladesh, that have traveled now in the West, in Paris now. And many of our artists here are even today in Asia now. A lot of the Bangladeshi artists. So
congratulations for
Thank
that. Thank you. And Ev, if you would like to introduce yourself, as we know, Ev is the founder and director of Whataboutart, which is really, I understand, the first arts agency of its kind in India. And your projects include Dhaka Art Summit and also Asia Now. So congratulations to the great success and pioneering efforts of your work in India and for promoting artists from the region, not only within South Asia, but beyond as well. But tell us a little bit about Whataboutart.
Yeah, so I was based in Mumbai for 12 years. And that's when I met Nadia and Rajib and started working for Dhaka Art Summit. So I created this agency. When I came to Mumbai like a decade ago, there was no agency for production to help private foundations realize their projects. So Dhaka Art Summit was one of the projects I started producing in 2012 or 14 was the first time. So it's been 10 years now that I'm part of this amazing adventure. And I had the honor of working with Sumayya and collaborate with her and the curators to make this piece happen in Dhaka.
Yes.
And I've been also collaborating with Alexandra in Asia now since 2020 now. And as a producer, I'm a bridge. So I'm really, and I want to be the bridge between South Asia and Paris, which is my hometown. So I'm really glad that thanks to Alexandra and all the work Asia now is doing, we can bring these projects now to Paris and to the French audience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So this work here in its iteration at Asia Now is a collaboration with this new wonderful museum. And Alexandra, who is a critic, a curator, producer, and editor, is now director of the Sufi Museum of Art and Culture, Museum of Sufi Art and Culture. And if you could just tell us about that, and later I want to ask, how was this collaboration? What role did your museum play as we move into the discussion specifically about Sufi and Sufism and Sumayya's practice?
Yeah, thank you very much. The museum is based in Château, so it's very close to Paris. It's in Western Paris, in the suburb. So the museum just opened on the 28th of September, so it's very, very new. And actually, we are very close with Asia now because we are linked by the river also, because the museum faces the river. So this is also our link. This museum, so it's Musée d'Art et de Culture Soufis MTO. It's really based on this dialogue between art, what is Sufism in relation with art and culture, and also in dialogue with contemporary art. So it means this museum has a collection with about 300 objects related to Sufism and its symbolic aspect, and we invite artists to produce new work in relation with Sufism. They don't have to be Sufi or even to belong to Islam. Most of them are not Sufi at all. And the first exhibition is, the title is Ciel intérieur. It means an inner sky. And it comes from this concept named by Henri Corbin, who is a French philosopher specialized with Sufi. And he wrote a lot about Ibn Arabi, who was also a very famous philosopher and mystic in the 12th century. And it's all about it's our inner sky, and the inner sky is our inner quest, which is the one of the Sufis. So it really highlights this journey, this inner journey from the earth to the sky, to the cosmos. So of course it was very strongly related to Sumayya's work, but we are going to talk about this later. And this just briefly, but the museum, the project of the museum is quite old actually. It comes from Iran in the 70s, and it was related to the master of the school. So MTO means Maktab Tahege Oveisi. So it's the school of the La Voix Oveisi. I don't know how to say La Voix. And at this time, the school was in Iran, still in Iran, and they had this project to create a museum dedicated to Sufi art, culture, and knowledge, to share it to all the world, because maybe some of you know that, but Sufism has always been transmitted through secret school. So it was not really something that everybody was able to know or to share, which is very different now because of the diaspora, because now lots of Sufi don't live anymore in their country for political reason. So that's why Sufism is becoming more and more universal in the way it addresses itself to the audience. So the museum is the result of this. So you were talking about what come from the east to the west, and this project of museum is the case, and it's also the result of a long journey, not only the inner journey but also a long geographical and historical journey from the west to from the east to the west, and how we can share that to anyone with artists coming from all over the world.
Thank you so much. From east to west and also from south to north. And Kathy, I want to congratulate you on this beautiful iteration of Sumayya's work with the most gorgeous title, Water in One Hand and Fire in the Other, for Asia Now. Do you want to explain a little bit your role in this project?
Thank you very much, Alexandra. But first of all, I would like to join you warmful thanks to all the participants of the panel. First of all, of course, Sumayya herself, but also Alexandra, who is the one who invited all of us to be part of this incredible experience named Asia Now. And I want to thank all my friends and colleagues who are part of this public now and the big public of Asia Now. And you, Alexandra, of course. So my role, my question was briefly, just to introduce myself. I am a curator, and generally speaking, I am an life and art lover. And I feel gifted since it's been years now, 5, that Alexandra invited me to collaborate and to share with her. First of all, I've been guest curator, and slowly, little by little, to share with her a more larger view on what could be this specific object as Asia Now. And before Asia Now moved out in La Monnaie de Paris, and since Asia Now moved. And during these years, she invited us, her team, to think about different notions, ideas, issues, such as the joy, and also togetherness, making community. And there are the main lines of what Asia Now tried to be. And for the 10th anniversary, for this specific edition, we try to find an idea to be able to gather all these issues. And this idea Alexandra found is ceremony. And from this stage, from the ceremony ideas, of course, Alexandra, for this anniversary, invited me to suggest a project. And meanwhile, I met Alexandra Baudelot, thanks to Nadia, who is here, in a dinner. And after a very short period of time, we decided to maybe try to work together, and we succeed to do that, to propose a curatorial project to Alexandra for Asia Now. I learned that Alexandra will be the new director of the Musée of Art and Culture Soufis, so it makes totally sense. And little by little, we thought together, we had encounters, work session, to find the artists we all like, including Alexandra, work together. And quickly, for many reasons, it was obvious that we all wanted to work with Sumayya Vally. Of course, because of her this wonderful pavilion commissioned by Serpentine, but also, and maybe firstly, and thanks to Nadia and to Rajib for what she did at the Dhaka Art Summit. So that's the beginning of how we've been working together, and we joined forces to be able to produce this. I would not say iteration, because iteration means repetition. It's not at all repetition. It's an artwork that we try to find its own roots and how it resonates with its specific context, which is Parisian, and Paris is not Dhaka. So we try to transform itself, or to find its resonance with the context of France and Paris in Asia Now. Did I respond?
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to just turn to Sumayya, who I think needs no introduction, but what I would like to add to your, the facts of your existence, which is that you are principal of Counterspace, architect of the 2021 Serpentine Pavilion, where some of us first encountered your work, and artistic director of the inaugural Islamic Arts Biennial in Jeddah. I see you as a world builder. Now I might cry. Someone who is imagining, designing, and engineering new ways for humanity to be and act together in our pluralistic, which you talk about a lot. You come from a very pluralistic world. You come from a very divided world, but you are constantly working to come up with forms and collaborative models that would bring together our community and our society, and through that, again, to build worlds. How did this work that you conceived first for Dhaka Art Summit, Sumayya, how does that exemplify? How does your approach?
Thank you so much. I also just wanted to say how lucky we all are to be speaking here at Asia Now with the incredible Alexandra Munroe, who so generously agreed to do this and is an expert in being able to hold conversations, and also I think an expert in the most important form of intelligence, which is generosity, as you're showing us here now and as you always do. So thank you so much. So incredibly grateful.
Thank you, Sumayya.
So yes, I was very, very lucky to be able to work on the first iteration at the Dhaka Art Summit, as you mentioned, and that work was really conceived of on a research trip to Dhaka, where we were looking at and interested in local intelligences and forms of making and forms of building. And one of the things we encountered is this incredible method of building, which involved ceramic vessels that are used almost the way that we use fired bricks in construction. So you'll see in many traditional homes that these pots are actually stacked on top of each other, and they have incredible structural strength. There was a lot that we found incredibly interesting about this from an architectural perspective, including that archaeologically they held many documents, so they were often used in the foundations of buildings, both structurally and also to be able to keep important transcripts and manuscripts and so on. And in South Asia, there were often evidence of Muslim families building homes in regions where it was said that there were no Muslim remains, oftentimes, because these documents and manuscripts were then found in the foundations of buildings. So there was that interest, but also from a material perspective, I was really interested in watching the ceramicists being able to make these vessels. And there is also a lot of resonance across practices between worlds. Just thinking about what you said about what a divided world I come from, that's absolutely true. Johannesburg is the most, where I'm from, is the most, South Africa is statistically still the most unequal society in the world because it is so incredibly unequal by design. And architecture is so absolutely implicated in that. It told us where we deserve, what we deserve, where we belong in society, how closely we can be situated to economic opportunity, and so on. So those things are all by design. But very early on in my practice, I was kind of struck by this idea that if we can see that architecture is a force for segregation, we also have to be able to understand it as a force for bringing people together. And because architecture is abstract in language, what it does is it also allows us to resonate across it from many different perspectives and many different viewpoints. And some of the things I found really interesting in the research in Dhaka is that it was so resonant with practices in Johannesburg. And so, for example, there are in particular rain calling ceremonies that happen across southern Africa, and very similar practices that happen in South Asia. Muslim history in South Africa is also, of course, very layered with Sufism. Some of the first Muslims who came to South Africa were Sufi in their practice, and we have many sites of what is believed to be miracles in South Africa as well. And from a very kind of seemingly different mythology in that regard, there are also prayers that happen for rain in that tradition, especially in Cape Town, but all across the country. And so I became really interested in these resonances, and we wanted to be able to make a structure that somehow touched on this or embodied this in some way. And also the theme of the Art Summit at that time was Bona, or this idea of flood, which really was about thinking about forms that embraced the weather or collaborated with it in some way. Because so many of the intelligences in the worlds that we are resonant with come from a place of wanting to collaborate with the weather rather than keep it out, are actually spurred on and generated by thinking about, for example, flood or rain as something that's generative, something that's cleansing. If we think about the ways nomadic peoples live across both desert and flood conditions, oftentimes there is movement, and structures are designed specifically for that. And so we thought about this pavilion that would dissolve over time. And it's actually, we called it a pavilion, but it actually in its essence is a performance work. So it was made with both fired and unfired clay vessels. And each day in the space, there was a performance in collaboration with students from Bangladesh, who made sound on the vessels and also performed with inside of the space. And they worked on an abstracted ceremony that was related to rituals of rain calling. And part of this ritual involved water in the space. So each day, this washing ceremony dissolved these unfired clay pots a little bit. And the idea was that at the end of the Art Summit, after the 9 days, that we'd be left with dissolved matter that could then go back into the earth. So really thinking about cyclical methods of making architecture, how we can touch the earth lightly, and also think about ways that, you know, we are also part of the earth. We're made of water and mud, and that we're also part of the cycle. And that is very much resonant with the iteration here. I think for me, the biggest evolution in the work is really thinking about the performance in the French context. And of course, we know that France is, of course, very related to Francophone Africa. And the performers that we worked with many of the performers that we worked with come from traditions that are resonant with practices that come from these regions. So North Africa, Algeria, our deaf performer is South Asian in heritage, I think. The female deaf performer. Yes, the male deaf performer is, I think, South Asian in heritage and joined us from London. So really thinking about how also practices travel in the bodies of people, and these are really important forms of belonging and of being able to make home when people find themselves in new or in different geographies. And it was incredible also to see the performance being able to take shape with so much resonance through these other bodies and other forms of practice, of course, interpreted differently, but really coming to life in the spirit of resonance across territory and across culture between South Africa, South Asia, North Africa, and France.
Extraordinary. Thank you, Sumayya. There was so much in that explanation, but one of the deep themes that recurs in your work is this attention to what you call local intelligence. And a part of that local intelligence is also the ever-present forms, sometimes quite monstrous, sometimes quite miraculous, of hybridity. But I wanted to bring that idea of local intelligence back to the Dhaka Art Summit, Nadia. And again, if you could expand a little bit on this theme that inspired Sumayya on this journey of research that crisscrossed the world and crisscrossed her own biological kind of peregrinations to end up in this, temple-like ceremonial structure of cyclical birth, creation, and return to the earth. But what does Bonna mean? How did that come to you and the curators?
So originally how it came is when our curator, because she spent a lot of time in Dhaka, our artistic director, her name is Diana Campbell Bitancourt. When she was fascinated with people's names, and Bonna is a name of a little girl, and Bonna is a common Bangladeshi name. And what it means, if you translate the name Bonna, it means flood in English. So the idea came that, okay, how can someone name their children or their girl like flood? But then I think over time, when we explained to her that Bonna, something to us means something very positive, that we welcome the rain in our culture. We have songs about rain. We have poetry about rain. It's a big celebration. It's like a holiday. It's a big celebration when we expect the first rain to come. That's our New Year. So our Bangladeshi New Year is the first day we welcome the rain. So that's why Bonna. But in a way, it is I think the way the theme came, the positive and the negative part of what Bonna means. That yes, it means flood. It means a disaster. That it can happen in a disaster, but then also it is welcoming the rain. It is good for our crops and our harvesting and all of that. So that's how the idea came. And of course, in a way, it's climate change.
Yeah.
So it is kind of taken from there. And then all the artworks and all the commissions were chosen through thinking about climate change mainly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So both to Sumayya and Kathy, Sumayya already touched on it, but Kathy, how would you, what was the thinking involved in rebirthing this work for the context of Paris? Because I think something else that Sumayya has spoken a lot about is the importance of context, and you spoke about it too. This is a Parisian context. And again, the relationship to Soufis here in Paris and its diasporic kind of connotations, and its connotations which would be different than in other parts of the world. How did you approach that, and are we going to see this also dissolve over the next few days?
I mean, methodologically speaking, what we did and what I aim to do as a curator is to gather resources at reach. And so, and Alexandra will speak more about Sufism, but resources here, as Sumayya pointed out, are people we're working in this big community, very diverse community, diasporic community from Asia. And from the starting point, it became clear that our intuition to insufflate a Sufi spirit within this artwork, within this installation, was a good idea. So it was a starting point. But as a curator, I had in mind, I was very interested. It's my main curiosity, excitement to see the installation outdoor, because of course it resonates with the climate and climate change, but I wanted the piece itself to be confronted and to be facing the rain, the wind, and the people. So it's been my first approach, and also that this piece is a sort of triangle in between ecology, spirituality, and we'll say, of course, art. And I think that when we define ecology as beyond being a science, ecology means how the living world can pay attention to the so-called non-living world. And to pay attention means how to create reciprocity, relation, interaction. And that's precisely how I feel, how I am in contact with Sumayya's installation. It's how the material world and how the human world is connected, but I mean practically, physically, and also of course spirituality is in contact with something that is beyond that. And so I think it's fitting perfectly to this approach to try to see how it resonates here in this specific context and with this Sufi spiritism.
You know, I can't help but see it as an art historian of the avant-garde, and of course what you're engaging here is also chance. I mean, the John Cage called it chance. Breton, we just all saw the Surrealist show, called it chance, but it's also nature. And we're reminded that the birth of the concept, the radical concept of introducing chance into the making and performance and iteration of a work of art in the context of the 20th century modernism actually was inspired radically by nature. And this is, it also reminds me so much of East Asian thought and especially Japanese ideas. And we've enjoyed tea together, and the idea of deformation and the beauty of deformation and the beauty of rust, the rusting, that is what, you know, sabi means, to rust. So it's the beauty of the natural dissolution of form and that transformation towards its death. That's kind of, it's holding temporality. It's a mark of temporality that's ephemeral in its very beauty, is also something that I see, I experienced this morning in your work. I think that brings us to Sufi and the importance of Sufi art and culture. What I'm still not quite clear of is, in Dhaka, were those performers Sufi performers? They are here, so I'm just trying to clarify for us.
It's very difficult to pinpoint those things because they were not. I mean, I don't think they would identify as such by any means. But in a way, I'm of South Asian heritage myself. My grandparents are all from India pre-partition. And I think something that I discovered in my research when I was working on the Islamic Arts Biennale in Jeddah last year is just how much practices moved across the ocean. So these Naqshbandi Sufi men were really described as the most cosmopolitan people who could speak Urdu, who could speak Turkish, who could speak Farsi, who could speak Arabic, who could speak Hindi. And they were described as men or people who were at once buttressed by empire, but completely resistant to it in their beings, in their bodies, and in their practices. And many of those practices migrated from South Asia to South Africa. And you know, there are many forms of dhikr or forms of remembrance that we have on a daily basis that many people would resonate with or identify as Sufi, that we grew up with, and we didn't necessarily call it anything. So I think in the practices of the performers in Dhaka and in Bangladesh, there was definitely a kind of natural resonance, regardless also of religion, I have to say, because of the cultural geography that is also fluid, and there's a lot of interface and interaction. So I think there are points of natural resonance and also an embodied understanding that I found very easy to communicate across somehow. But it was never intended to be specifically a Sufi by any means. It was, of course, a different context and project. It's only, I think, retrospectively looking back now that you ask, I think it also completely is, at least from my perspective. I don't know what.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree with what Sumayya says. The performers were artists, students. The musicians were again artists who were students. So these young girls, and it was something like we had. It was I can't remember. Probably it was like an open call where we invited like performance artists who would like to be a part of this, and then yeah, it just took over. They spoke, they practiced, and it was just so natural. It was so natural, the way with the project, with the washing and all the music and everything that was included, the sound.
I just wanted to quickly add, while we have the slide of the Islamic Biennale app, that oftentimes, and I think it's resonant with what Alexandra said about working with artists. When we were working on the Biennale, for example, many of the artists were Muslim, but we really thought about methods of practice that are related to themes and philosophies that come from the faith. So many artists were working with forms of repetition that in themselves are very meditative. Many of the things that you talked about in terms of thinking about processes that are cyclical or processes that weather and evolve and somehow kind of display or evidence that in their forms and in their methodologies. We also wanted to work with artists that are very collaborative in how they make things, so that there is a community around the work. Oftentimes in many historical cases, so many of these forms of making were anonymous because they were made by large groups of people, or they were also made for ritual practices. So thinking about artists who practice in that way, I think was important for that project, but is something that I think relates very much to both iterations of the project. And I wanted to, while we were talking about making, also invite Ev to talk about the production of the work itself, because of course we collaborated with ceramicists in a village outside of Dhaka, and that translated very differently to Paris.
Yeah, thank you, Sumayya. Also, yeah, I'd like to speak about the process of making the work. And as you mentioned, Alexandra, Sumayya's practice is very collaborative. Of course, we spoke about the performers, the musicians, the craftsmen are a very important part of the piece. And it's challenging in both places. So in South Asia, there are lots of crafts. Bangladesh is very rich with different crafts, and Sumayya worked with the potters community in a village outside of Dhaka. So they have their practice, and it's always challenging to. These are ancestral practices and ancestral forms and ancestral ways of using the material. So when we do these collaborations with artists coming from outside of Bangladesh, and we work in contemporary art with them, that to make them change while using the ancestral practice, how are we able to make them change it to produce the piece? So I think as a producer, this is like the fine, kind of process we have to do. And of course, in Dhaka, we have a team of amazing producers on ground who are working with Dhaka Art Summit since 10 years, and I've been able to work between both artists and craftsmen. In Paris, in France, the challenge is that craft is dying. And potters who have the skills to do pieces, jars that are made with the wheel. It was very difficult for us to find a workshop with craftsmen. We were able to do that, so we found someone who is based in Les Vosges, which is on the east of France, and has a workshop and works with contemporary artists. So we were able to establish that dialogue with them. So both ways, it's always a challenge, but I think in both places the work turned out to be quite beautiful. Yeah,
very beautiful. Thank you. Congratulations to you. I do want to just, since we have Alexandra on the panel, would love to hear. I think Sumayya was very clear. This is not about Sufism. It is about resonances of Sufi art and culture and ways of being throughout the parts of the world that her practice encompasses. From your more academic point of view, maybe you could just enlighten us of, if we were to describe what aspects of this or other areas, we certainly know it's a great interest. We know it's a great interest of Sumayya's. What sort of are the universal principles? What are some fundamental ideas that you feel this work and maybe other artists also in the contemporary space are drawing from? And this is also what your museum is dedicated to.
Yeah, sure. Maybe first we can talk about the title of the work. It's Fire in one hand, Water in one hand, and Fire in the other. So the titles come from this Sufi poet woman, a very famous one called Rabia. And it's the first poet we know. It was also a very powerful mystic, Sufi mystic. She lived in Iraq in the 9th century. And we don't know so much about her. She's full of legend and marvelous stories, as all saint and incredible character can have. And one of the stories is that she was walking with a pot of water in one hand and a torch in the other hand. And with the water, she wanted to throw it in the hell, so hell would disappear. And with the torch, she wanted to put the fire in the paradise, so the paradise would experiment what is the fire. So the idea was to say that spirituality doesn't need hell or paradise. Spirituality is here, and it's in our hand to find it between our earth and our sky. So this is one principle that is very interesting also. It's how Sufism is really related with this relationship between what is visible and invisible, the materiality, and also the spiritual world. Mm-hmm. So it's always a journey between that, and this journey, of course, is about an inner quest, and how spirituality is about an inner quest. So it gives a very strong light on how to be connected to different culture all around the world. And it's what is interesting for us as a museum is to follow this orientation to invite artists in relation with Sufism. So if we come back to how we could speak about this artist related to Sufism, it's really based on this travel between different worlds and how it could be connected to Sufism. And also I can add something about the fact that it's also about transformation. So this is strongly related to your work and this piece, how materiality go back to materiality and can transform to other aspect of life. So it's also related to the exhibition we have now, because it's all about this. The exhibition starts at the moment of the equinox of autumn, and it finishes at the equinox of spring. Equinox of spring is also related to Nowruz, which is the New Year in Iran, but different country. And it's the celebration of the rebirth of the nature. So this exhibition is related to that, and I'm very happy because Sumayya's work will go after the fair, will go at the museum, and will be exhibited in the garden, the Person Garden. So it will be really related to the natural elements during 5 months, so following this cycle of elements and also of the season.
Beautiful.
And probably everything will go back to the earth, definitely. I mean, the crude pot.
Yeah.
So we are going to experiment that. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I just, wanted to add something about the performer here. So it's, as you say, Sumayya, it comes from different parts of the world in relation with Sufism. So there are these 4 performers. We saw 3 here. There is a 4th one. And also the musician who is from Iran is a daf player, and he belongs to a wider group called Zendedelan. And it's musicians from all over the world, both contemporary and traditional, and they are all playing Sufi music in different aspects. So we are very lucky to have one of them, and also another one this weekend.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for lending all your expertise to realize this work for all of our enjoyment. We're coming to an end, but before we do open it up to questions, I just wanted to invite Sumayya to speak about any one of your current projects. I would personally love for you to speak about the Whataboutart Bridge, which I know you've been working on for some time now. And in its own way, it also combines these different kind of dimensions of your practice, which is, of course, research into history, research into the relationship between Europe and Africa and the colonial history, research into lost historical figures and how to honor them, a sort of ancestor worship, if you will, as well as an extraordinary form that you are. Yes, thank you. If you could bring us to, right there. This rendering of the bridge that Sumayya is working on now, and also brings us to nature. So if you will, just share with us your thinking about this project.
Thank you so much. That's so incredibly generous to ask. Thank you. And you know about it, so I hope I'm not going to bore you. I just wanted to ask if there's one slide before this that has some research imagery. Oh, no. Just one slide before. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So the bridge is located in a very, very small town in Belgium called Vilvoorde. And it was originally a very, very simple brief for a utilitarian pedestrian bridge that crosses over a body of water. And when I first got the invitation to compete for this project, I went to Vilvoorde and I thought, I don't know that I'm quite the right voice to be speaking from this perspective because I don't know the Belgian vernacular landscape very well. And it really is a very historical town. I think if you have it in your imagination, there are a lot of cobbled streets and a lot of old industrial buildings. So I didn't feel like my voice was the right one to work on the project originally. But then I read that Vilvoorde is one of the most diverse Flemish towns. And I became really interested in how that developed and why. And as you mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation, my work is really concerned with and interested in the relationships between territories and geographies. And I think that is, for me, an incredible form of power that we all have, because what it allows us to do is to invite everybody into a conversation. rather than to silo something as my domain or yours. I think like these Naqshbandi Sufis that I mentioned, somehow because of migration, so many of our territories are intertwined. So when I started to look into it, I found that one of the reasons that Vilvoorde is known to be so diverse is because before the First World War, when Belgium was a colonial superpower, so to speak, Vilvoorde was one of its hearts of industry. And it meant that it brought a lot of labor from the Congo. So I started to look at who these first migrants were, and I found this incredible figure whose name is Paul Panda Fanana. And he was the first person in Belgium to study from the Congo, and he happened to study in this little town in Vilvoorde. So he studied horticulture, and he is described as a real genius. He passed cum laude and went on to work for the Belgian government. So he planted all over Belgium and the Congo on some very high-profile projects, but also on a physical level, what the landscape looks like until today is in part his work and his research. And then he was conscripted to the army, and he was treated with extreme violence and discrimination, as all people from the Congo were at that time. And he wrote extensively about conditions that they had to live under, which involved disease, which were very unsanitary, and of course the violent beatings that they often sustained and so on. And he came back from this experience as an activist. So he aligned himself with forms of resistance around the continent. He was instrumental in organizing some of the first Pan-African conferences in Europe with Du Bois and several others. He advocated for the wages of Black people to be more fair. And he really, when you put it all together, made a very significant impact to the lives of Black people in Belgium. So much so that he was assassinated when he was in his early 40s by poison. And when he died, Belgium banned people from the Congo from studying there for some time, supposedly because of the impact that he had. He's also been willfully kind of erased from history, and it's only in the 1980s that Congolese academics have started to really write and advocate for his story to be more told. So when we came upon this research, I thought that this feels like something that really wants to be fuel for a design and find its way into an homage to Fanana. And we started to look at, again, water architectures from the Congo. And there are these incredible carved boat structures, which, as you see there, when they're stacked up next to each other, they become places of gathering. So they become almost like town centers where people come and meet and where trading happens and so on. And I thought that sentiment was very beautiful. So next slide. So our bridge is a series of conjoined boats. And if you look at the image in the corner, each of them is planted with species that come from Fanana's horticultural research. And then a little bit like the Serpentine Pavilion, I'm also thinking about diaspora. Diaspora actually means to disperse seeds, spora. And so we thought about this main bridge structure, but also then smaller little boat structures that will float along the riverbank and pollinate this previously industrial zone where so many people toiled the landscape. And that is going to be in collaboration with local schools and community centers so that children will tend to the garden and learn about the story of Fanana. And so just to quickly finish off, when we presented to the jury, they said that they'd never heard of Fanana, but they were incredibly moved by the story. So they started to publish articles in the local newspapers about who he is, and there was much interest that started to be garnered around him at the same time in the country, and he's just been announced to be in the Flemish canon, so included in the textbooks. And we're currently fundraising for the project, but hopefully it happens. And again, to come back to both of these projects, I think is really concerned with the resonance that exists across places, and how we can also think about that as a way to bring people into the same conversation.
Thank you, Sumayya, and congratulations. Really brilliant work. Sumayya, as many of you know, is a dear friend of our beloved Hans-Ulrich Obrist, again, who was the curator for the 2019 Serpentine. We all know that his favorite word is urgency, but his other favorite word these days is miracle. And I think that his dear friend Sumayya embodies both urgency and the miraculous. I want to just open it up to see if we have any questions. I think we probably have just a few more minutes. Any questions to Sumayya or anyone else on the panel about the work here or the work in Dhaka, or now that we've heard about it, this extraordinary project in Belgium? Honorary and Evelyne, qu'est-ce que vous pensez? Any comments? Let's wait for the mic.
No, it's just that's very interesting, and just a question concerning the process of the work, which is here, the process of development, and it seems that you worked mainly with women. The makers were women, and I wanted to know if yes, the craft people were yes in Dhaka, or yes in other countries where you worked. In general, are more women, or yeah.
I think so. My team in South Africa is all women. No, it just so happened. I think I do collaborate a lot with women, and I also enjoy that collaboration very much. In Dhaka, in the ceramics village, we worked with both men and women. So in one of the images you saw some feet on a mound of clay. Those are the feet of a man, but then there are also women that are involved in several parts of the actual formation of the pots. And we had very simple pots, but also in its adornment and in its decoration. We worked with Sean Anderson in Dhaka curatorially as well, and the musicians that we worked with in Dhaka were men, but the performers in the space were women. So I think it is both. And I think, I mean, I am really interested in people bringing other bodies of, well, in all of us bringing different bodies of knowledge to the project. I think as women, we bring incredible knowledges, but, you know, so too do people who grew up in environments of difference that are, as Alexandra said, different to the mainstream. I'm reminded of a project that I worked on in Pakistan with an artist, Yasmin Lari, and in that project we were working to restore a mosque and an necropolis in Sindh. And related to the project, in the same vicinity, she was teaching women how to build these incredible earthen stoves. It's partly an architectural project, but it is mainly an entrepreneurial project for women, as she sees it, to capacitate women in that village. And something that she described to me that I thought was so interesting is she said that part of how she drew out confidence in these women that they could build is that she likened and also learned from their intelligences in the kitchen. And so she said that when they were kneading the earth and to be able to pour the mud for these stoves, she likened that process to being able to knead dough and bread, and that those forms of intelligence and those forms of decoration in the way that they started to plait and braid the mud when it reached a certain consistency, they also brought by themselves, and that's an intelligence that comes from their own way of being that actually has something to contribute to construction that I can learn from as an architect, but also that all of us can learn from if we think about different ways to approach sustainability in our planet. And that's a very small example, but if we thought about that at scale, I think there's so much to be learned from different kinds of contexts, and also different disciplines and different bodies of knowledge, whether that is music or whether that is anything. Especially as an architect, I think we need to be able to draw more on those. Does anyone else want? I think it's very important that Ev talks about the production itself.
Yeah, I mean, so in Sumayya spoke about Dhaka. I also wanted to say that in Dhaka, we brought the potters to the Dhaka Art Summit. So the most of the production happened in their village. But then during the summit, we had men, I think 4 men from the community came, and we had a space for them in the summit where they were making the raw pots fresh for the performance so that they can dissolve with the action and activation of the performers. Of course, in France, it was a little bit different. I was saying we had the workshop outside of Paris, pretty far, which is run by a wonderful man, Thibaut Chaguet, who works with contemporary artists and who was really able to understand the project and work with a company which produces what is called ojas, these are irrigation jars. So it's also an ancestral irrigation methodology. So the jar is put in the ground, and then the water slowly goes through the ceramic to irrigate. So the pots you see in Paris are a mix between these irrigation systems and designs of Sumayya.
Brilliant. One more question, and then I think we might have people wanting to get in for the next session. Yes. Can we have a mic? Thank you.
Sorry, we missed the beginning. We just joined at the end, but you spoke about Sufi and philosophy and art of Sufi. And what do you think? Do you cover when you speak about Sufi? Do you expand geography? Because Sufi, it's not only Iran, but it's also Kazakhstan, for instance, Central Asia. And in Kazakhstan, there is a big figure, Khoja Ahmed Isavi. There is a tomb, mausoleum of Khoja Ahmed Isavi, and there is a lot of knowledge and philosophy behind. Do you also try to cover this part of there? And maybe that is also the base to make beyond geography and to expand the art within Central Asia and beyond. What do you think? Yeah, I'm sorry because we did not hear maybe in the beginning.
Yeah,
that's why the question is a
question.
bit. Yeah.
Are you inviting us all to?
Yeah, absolutely.
We would love to come.
It's
Sumayya.
Kazakhstan, and we'll be happy to welcome you.
So I don't know if you missed it, but I did mention some of the way that Sufi practice migrated to Africa, and South Africa or Southern Africa in particular. So I think that, and also that my own work and personal practice is very invested and interested in thinking about the relationships between place and between geography, and the ways that migration links us together, specifically through forms of culture, whether that is mythological practice, belief systems, and forms of cultural production. So those threads are things I'm generally always looking for and researching in my work. But I also think that perhaps your question is related directly to the Sufi Museum. So I want to let Alexandra speak.
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. Of course, definitely it's open to all geography around the world. There is also Pakistan, India, South Africa, of course, North Africa, Turkey, and now I would say United States, Canada, Europe. It's really everywhere because of the diaspora. And in every country where the politics is against freedom, then you have a diaspora, Sufi diaspora. So that's why, and of course, it's the as I said, the museum is about Sufi art, culture, and knowledge. So it's really the collection mostly come from Iran for the moment, but it's completely open to other country and other artists from all over the world.
I mean, the history of Sufi and also Baha'i is actually very important in the history of American modernism and the avant-garde, with very important artists who actually converted to Baha'i in the mid-century, and artists like Ad Reinhardt, who traveled widely in the region and thought of himself as a white Muslim. And the aniconic work and the so-called black square paintings that he did, of course, are not a black square. They're actually a cross made up of 9 squares. And he writes extensively in correspondence with the theologian Thomas Merton, interfaith theologian Thomas Merton, about this sort of interfaith approach, and specifically about Sufi, and specifically about these kind of ecstatic forms of Islamic tradition, so that are grounded in some kind of sacred geometry and cosmology. So yes, I think there's so much research to be done, and you remind us and are part of a long history, a long lineage of artists in modern and contemporary worlds who have found sustenance in interpreting and reinterpreting and reimagining some of the founding principles and aesthetics and belief systems. So with that, we thank Alexandra Fin again for providing this opportunity, and congratulations to Rajiv and to Nadia for the extraordinary success of Dhaka Art Summit that gave birth to this amazing work. Thank you.